And as far as worldwide topics of conversation, well, that links right into our next speaker, because Amelia Nolan is a person who's fabulous about linking conversations between us as people in agriculture and on the farm with urban populations. And we know that it's not just agriculture, that we are talking about methane and climate change and global warming, and that our urban populations are really looking at that issue as well. And so it's just one example of the many topics that we can talk about with people. People are not on farm about what we're doing in that space. And I know Amelia's got lots of points that we'll be able to share and learn from her on how do we connect with people on issues such as this and many, many others. So I'd like to welcome Amelia, or Millie Nolan. She's the events manager for the Livestock Collective, and she delivers professional development workshops right across the livestock supply chain. And she grew up in regional Victoria, Australia, and she's worked in a number of roles across the country and overseas, particularly in sheep, wool and client services. So we know that the divide between rural and urban populations just continues to grow and grow. So creating the message that resonates when we're talking to people in the city is just as important as ever. And so that's what Millie's here to help us with today, bridging the gap between rural and urban populations. I've done a few workshops with Millie, and you're in for a treat. I'm really excited for you to be able to learn from her some of the leadership skills that it takes to be an influential advocate for industry, to better understand the community sentiment, and just some of the simple do's and don'ts of having a conversation with members of the public opposed to people that are more familiar with agriculture. So as Millie gets her slides together, please put your hands together and welcome Millie Nolan.
Thank you, Melissa. I'll get my slides up. Have you got them there?
Looking good.
Excellent.
Thanks, Millie.
So, our vision at the Livestock Collective is for everyone to have a shared understanding of and connection to agriculture. And so we do this through promoting a really collaborative and united not only sheep sector, but livestock and agricultural supply chain more broadly. And we've seen that we've some great success, that we've built trust and acceptance and bridged the gap on some of arguably agriculture's most difficult topics, such as live export. And when I was asked to speak at this Global Sheep Forum, I did a bit of research into all the different partners that have collaborated for this event. And it was a theme across all of their communication, and I think we all have a great story to share. And I know in Australia that whether we want to call it bridging the gap or social license, community sentiment, public perception, this idea of building trust and acceptance is a really common theme, not only in the sheep industry, but across agriculture more broadly. So, for example, our peak research, development and marketing body for red meat has said that they want people to feel good about eating Australian red meat. They want our customers, consumers and communities to recognise the vital role our industry plays in food production and food security, and trust us to deliver a high-value, high-quality product. So this is their target by 2030. They really want people to feel good about it. The equivalent body for Australians wool producers have said a challenge for agricultural industries is to understand which signals of social licence-induced change are from the mainstream and which reflect the extremes of public opinion. It can be expensive to undertake activities to maintain social licence, but much more expensive and even prohibitive to regain it once it has been lost. They also say, farmers may believe they have the right to farm, but equally the market has a right to not buy their products. Now, Dairy Australia, dairy cattle that is. Now, later on in my speech, it will make more sense why I'm on a Global Sheep Forum talking about these other industries, but bear with me for now. Dairy Australia have identified that an industry challenge for them is that public expectations are changing and consumers are increasingly questioning food and the way it is produced. And so they have a whole pillar around this, and they want strong community support for dairy. And their goal is enhanced trust and value in the Australian dairy industry, farmers and products. And then it goes into all these success indicators. So they want people to trust that dairy farmers are looking after the environment, that they're looking after the animals, and that dairy products are a healthy and nutritious choice. But they also have a target for 60% of farmers to be actively promoting the industry by 2025. But they currently don't have a baseline. There's a whole pillar in the pork industry around social licence as well. So as you can see in Australian agriculture, it is a really common theme. And so at the Livestock Collective, we are taking action because, as Holly Ludeman puts so well, when there's a void of information, it will be filled. And we cannot have that void being filled by those who are not the experts. I want today to encourage you guys and empower you all to think of yourselves as the expert and someone who can fill this void of information and bridge the gap that may exist wherever you are in the world. At the Livestock Collective, we do this in a couple of ways. We've got our vision, and we do this by informing the general public, which I'll delve into a little bit later. And we also empower the agricultural supply chain to do so as well. And all of this, it goes into, building consumer trust and acceptance and bridging that gap. Before I delve into a little bit more about how we do this, I just want to reiterate who we are not. We are not activists, we're not a lobbying group, and we're not politically involved or orientated whatsoever. We are simply a non-for-profit organisation focused on growing the public's understanding of and connection to agriculture in a really authentic way. So to bridge the gap, we have a few main priorities. We have our communications. So as you can imagine, the social media and website is such powerful tools. We have our events, and we have our livestock leaders workshops, which is what we call the workshops where we are empowering the supply chain. Now, in our events, we have the public-facing ones and also the agricultural events such as this, where I get the honour of coming along and talking to all of you lovely people and hopefully empowering you to be a source of information and to bridge the gap wherever you are. Social media is a huge platform for us. I have got all the links in the chat. I really encourage you guys to check us out. We know that we have organically grown. If you were online this morning, our founder and managing director shared her story of how a simple blog of her addressing some topics that weren't being talked about all of a sudden went viral, and it's really built into what it is today as the Livestock Collective, even though she started as the Sheep Collective. So we do about 10 posts a month, and they often reach tens of thousands of views. But what we're really conscious of in this is breaking out of the echo chamber. Because whilst it's great to be connecting with all of you guys are mostly part of agriculture, and we really want to target those in the public who aren't connected to agriculture. So through this, we spend a lot of time and energy into identifying what the public actually want to know. So that screenshot on the right there is a graphic of how many cattle mortalities there are on live export ships, which was identified as one of the key questions that the public were wanting to know about. And we really delve into more of these questions in a simple frequently asked question page on our website. So in the last few months alone, our website has over 60,000 views and single pages are getting thousands of views. And I really encourage you guys to look this up and read more about Australian agriculture. And what you'll notice is that wherever you are, whatever area of the supply chain you're from, you will be able to understand the language that we use. And that's one of our core values is being transparent and using language that we know will resonate with the public, because they don't always know our technical jargon. And we do it in a really authentic way that makes sure that we use supply chain people that are able to talk about their area of expertise. This is us at a show. So when we attend events, sometimes we go to ones with a really large urban audience. And so we're there to act as a source of information for them to engage with and ask questions. So this is at the capital city in Western Australia, and we spent a few days here and we had over 1,000 recorded meaningful conversations and many, many more people through here. And so people were asking us questions like, what do sheep eat? And things like that. And we were able to talk to them and really debunk any queries or concerns that they had about our industry. And if you can see there as well, we have our virtual goggles that the kids and adults alike enjoy, because it takes you straight on the farm or onto the station, where you can really immerse yourself in the industry. And for some people, that's the only opportunity they ever really have to actually connect with the sheep industry and agriculture more broadly. So we're connecting with the public ourselves, but what we also want to do is empower sheep producers, cattle producers and the likes to do so as well. And so it's not only having these conversations on social media, but also in the media and just every day at the dinner table. So giving them the confidence and skills to share their story, but also address some of our difficult topics, you know, whether it is methane, which we were just talking about, or live export or mulesing, or plant-based meats, like concerns that we can really address and make it resonate with the public to bridge that gap in a really authentic way. We know that our workshops are very well received with the almost 200 alumni. Their overall satisfaction was almost 100%. But what's really important to us is that these guys are going out there and, first of all, speaking from their area of expertise, but mostly they have the support of our collective network in doing so. So they have all the other 200 people from not only our industry, but all the other industries as well. So if they ever get asked a question, they can refer it, or they can really work together to answer some of the queries and have a really united voice. And the Livestock Collective has been recognised as a source of information that broadens stakeholder views in peer-reviewed journals, definitely relating mostly to social licence and animal welfare. So that's a great success of ours. So we're targeting these people, we're targeting the public, but who actually is the public? Who is this urban population we're talking about when we say we want to bridge the gap? It is really easy to think of the likes of animal activists, and fair enough. They're very well funded, they're very loud, they're very well coordinated. In 2020 alone, Animals Australia were donated over $20 million. For those of you who don't know, Animals Australia is a campaigning and lobbying group in Australia that all this fund goes into fighting against agriculture. So their aim is to alleviate suffering on the widest possible scale by reducing the number of animals in food systems and the number of animals who remain in food systems. They do a very good job of their campaigning, clearly, over $20 million in donations a year, which was actually a 48% year-to-year increase on 2019. And I think we all fondly remember that 2020 was when COVID hit. So people still valued animal welfare enough to be donating to these sorts of causes. But unfortunately, we know that this doesn't actually improve animal welfare. Fortunately, these groups are a minority, so not many people are animal activists at all. And what I've actually got a few questions for you here, which I'm really hoping you can turn your cameras on or engage with me in the group chat for this. But what I really want to highlight is it's certainly based in Australia, but it can be reflective of the rest of the world, who our audience is, because it's not the animal activists. Their minds are made up, but there's a big chunk of the population who can still engage, or we can still engage with, to bridge the gap. So my first question for you is, what percentage of the Australian community do you think doesn't know a single person who works in agriculture and rural industries? Does anyone have any guesses? And I actually have some Livestock Leaders alumni in here. Susan, have you got any ideas?
Well, Millie, I'm thinking it's pretty high. Is it 80-90%?
Susan, you've forgotten your homework. It's actually 42%. So 42% of the Australian population don't know a single person in agriculture. My next question for you guys is, what percentage of the Australian community know one or two? So they've got a slight connection to agriculture and rural industries. Susan, can you redeem yourself?
Absolutely not. I'm not saying a word. The 46%.
It's 22%. So all up, about 64% of people in Australia don't really have a connection to agriculture. My final question is, what percentage of consumers are interested in knowing more about farming and food processing?
80%.
Closer, 65%. What do you guys think about that? 65%. Is there anything, Steve? Do you have any comments on 65% of people?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty. I think there's pretty broad in terms of is it food or agriculture that they're interested in? Are they are they interested in how their product was processed or reached their
farming and food processing broadly? And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, why it's so broad. But at the Livestock Collective, we see 65% as a huge opportunity. 65% of people want to know more about what we do. Awesome. Let's tell them. Let's connect with them. And I'd really encourage you all to look at your own country and your own divide that we're talking about, and see what opportunity there is there. How many people are interested in knowing more, and can you be that expert that provides that to them? And a little bit more about that 65%. So this is why I've been talking about, dairy cattle and all these other industries. It's because the public don't actually differentiate between sheep producers, cattle producers, live export, grain, horticulture, anything like that. They have us under one umbrella, and that's why we need to be really united in how we approach these conversations, and why I've been talking about all these other industries when I'm at a global sheep forum. What one industry does impacts their opinions of all industries. They have us all lumped in together. 2 in 3 people believe Australian farmers treat animals bound for slaughter with welfare and respect. When an industry isn't talking, most people assume that it has something to hide. I think that one speaks volumes into the opportunity that we have here. And when people know someone in a rural industry, they're more likely to trust the industry. So if we go back to that earlier stat, if one of those 65% of people, they meet me or they meet you and they have a conversation, and they base their opinion not only on the sheep industry, but all of agriculture and rural industries more broadly on that conversation, along with what they see in the media and social media, how do we ensure that they at least have a neutral stance, and if not a positive stance, on our industries? So I'm going to give you some quick do's and don'ts of how we can go about that. First of all, we need to be respectful at all times, whether we agree or disagree with their views. And the reason for this is, especially online, there are thousands of people forming opinions based on conversations that they're actually not even always involved in. And so if we are seen to be disrespectful, it automatically tarnishes our brand. So we really need to remember that there's thousands of people viewing conversations wherever they are, and to remain respectful at all times. We also need to understand that food choice is deeply personal. It often surrounds family, religion, culture. This is a global forum. I'm sure there's millions of influences into what each one of us decides to put into our mouths. And that choice is deeply, deeply personal. We also have to accept that the disconnect, or this bridge or divide that we're talking about, it isn't anyone's fault. So in Australia, for example, years ago, there were lots of families in the city that also had cousins in the country, and they had that connection to agriculture because they'd go out to the country or rural and spend their school holidays there. And for many different reasons, that's just not as common anymore. And as sooner we accept that, the better. And then we can work forward about how we can bridge it. And when we do get asked a question by someone who is disconnected from agriculture, it is an absolute privilege to be asked. We cannot be annoyed that they don't know. It is an absolute privilege to be asked, and a huge opportunity to bridge that gap and build trust. The don'ts of communication. We can't assume knowledge just because this is what we live and breathe. It doesn't mean that they all have some knowledge automatically. We can't assume that they know anything. And so the really important thing to do there is listen. We need to listen to them, understand their concerns, understand where their knowledge is at. And once we've actually asked them a few questions and connected with them, they'll actually trust us more and feel more validated in what we have to say. And then what we're sharing with them as the experts, remember you're the experts, will be much better received. We can't become offensive or aggressive, don't need to reiterate that one anymore. But we also can't enter a conversation to educate. Yes, the education might be an outcome, and yes, it's certainly something that's really important in our school systems, for example. But if we enter a conversation to educate and shoves fact down their throat, we're not likely to get very far. But if we aim to connect with them, to understand their values, we're much more likely to have a really powerful conversation that's actually going to influence them. And as I said earlier, we can't use any technical industry jargon that, as the practical people that we are, we know really well. So we have to get out of that habit. Because trust is driven, is going to drive change in this divide that we have, but that's going to come from those values and communicating in the respectful, authentic way and talking about your area of expertise only after you've listened to them. If we just shove facts down their throat, we're not likely to get very far. And I really, really encourage all of you guys to look up the Centre for Food Integrity, and they have some really awesome stuff on how we can do this. So we're having these conversations. These are a couple of examples at the Livestock Collective. Now, I won't show the clip just because we're online, but it was a video of sheep on board a live export vessel. And lovely Grace here is very concerned about their feed and water, and she's got lots and lots of question marks, which we're happy to answer. We've said, hi, Grace. In the first part of the clip, the sheep are eating and fresh water is always available. And she said, oh, great. And then in the end, she said, after we've said, we love your questions, keep them coming, she said, I've actually shared this post, I've shared it with my friends. And so our message is getting out there, and that was a really respectful conversation, but we could have easily taken offence to all those question marks at the beginning. This is another one where they're asking, is it accurate? I said, thank you for your comment. The footage was taken on a recent voyage by an accredited veterinarian, so we validated ourselves. If you have any more questions, we're happy to answer them. And then we've got some industry support. And our key message here is that animal welfare is the top priority. So there's some examples from us, but also our alumni are doing the same thing. And so Ali here, you can see her comment right in the middle. Ali is very much involved in the feedlot industry. And if you really look at the first couple of comments, they're going, this is going in the complete wrong direction. And how on earth could they think that feedlots are a solution? And Ali has written a statement that really validates herself, is really respectful in her language, and has actually prompted them to ask more questions. So she said, working in the industry and someone who's also passionate about the environment and finding sustainable solutions to feed the world, I know firsthand that feedlots regularly turn their waste into a natural fertiliser. And she's gone into more points to support that and validate herself. And she's also listed their accreditation systems that needed in feedlots. And then if you look at that bottom comment, they're going, I'm hoping so. I have a few more questions if you'd like to answer them. And so it's an example of a conversation where Ali, who is clearly an expert in this part of feedlotting, could easily have said, oh, these guys have no idea, how frustrating. But she said, no, this is an opportunity to have a conversation. And it's gone really well because she spoke from the truth and she did it in an authentic way that actually prompted them to ask more questions. And so these are identified as our priorities in the industry in Australia, and I'm hoping that they can be adopted globally as well. And I know that there's work being done in many different countries. But we need to be responsive to these community attitudes and communicate any changes. We need to proactively engage in areas of community concern and respond to breaking issues quickly and openly, which very much relate to our values of being transparent and being visible. We demonstrate responsiveness through action, which I think can only be demonstrated, like earlier we were talking about methane and everything that we're doing to mitigate that. So we know that we're taking steps globally to actually improve some areas of our industry. We respond productively and consistently and use popular channels to communicate and engage and really prompt those questions. So this is a lot of the social media that I've been talking about. But we really do have such a great story to tell, and that was really evident as I worked through and looked at all the global partners. And it's not just about using social media and these powerful platforms, but if you're in the city, if you have a conversation at the dinner table, it's such a powerful way that we can make those little micro influences on bridging the gap that we have. There's about 1 billion sheep in the world, and so whether you're on here and you call yourself a farmer or a shepherd or a rancher or whatever else you call yourself, all of us are experts of our own story and our own industry, and I really hope that I can inspire you and empower you to use that influence that you have to bridge the gap. Because leadership, Holly Ludeman, our founder and managing director who spoke this morning, also said this, but I'm going to reiterate it because I think it's such a fantastic quote, that leadership is a social influence in which a person can enlist the aid and support of others. And so if we're going to achieve our vision of everyone having understanding of and connection to our industry, you guys are a part of that. Every conversation that you have can influence that, and I really encourage you guys to put your expert hat on for whatever area of the supply chain that you are, and really join our collective movement to build more trust and to bridge that gap. Because unfortunately, I know we said that they're a minority, but they are very loud, but we do have voices that combat us and are very against what we do, and it's not even messaging as loud and as blatant as meat is murder. It can be something as subtle as a bank. This is a bank in Australia, a very reputable one, that has said that they will no longer lend to organisations that use intensive animal farming systems or organisations that live export animals. So it's not saying ban live export or we hate sheep farmers or anything, but it's just saying we're not going to lend to them. And it's the subtle messaging that the public is receiving that we need to be on the front foot of and actually respond to. And so your support really does go a long way. I put all of the links for social media in the group chat. Please, if you jump on, give us a follow and a like. If you have some friends in the city, share our page with them, and really encourage you guys to get involved in our collective movement. Thank you very much for having me speak at this global forum. It's been fantastic. I was joined in for the first session this morning, and hats off to everyone around the globe getting together and pulling this off.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Millie, for sharing a whole lot more about what the Livestock Collective is doing and giving us some examples of how that is, that group is using the tools that you're educating people with across the country and empowering people with, more importantly, to help bridge that gap and enhance communication. So if anyone has some questions, again, light up the chat with any questions, or feel free to unmute yourself and answer them directly. But I've got a couple that have been sent through to me. So Millie, if you're happy to answer some. Now, again, people would have heard this morning from your colleague Holly around sharing values. You both mentioned it. And so the quote I've heard is shared values, not facts and figures. Just had someone mention that. And can we have a bit more information? What is a shared value? And how would we connect with someone opposed to those facts and figures that you've mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll use the example of climate change and what we were talking about earlier. It's clearly an agenda of ours across the globe. We had a great presentation from what they're doing in New Zealand just before. But that's something that we value, and perhaps it's in the environment or climate change or whatever you want to call it. But that might be something that a lot of people in the city or in that urban population are also concerned about. And so if we can identify that that's a common value of ours, even if they're saying that sheep are causing some of this problem, if we identify that, hang on, that's a common value that we have, then we can use that to communicate. Say, we're really concerned about this too. What have you heard? And then listen to what they hear. And then after a few chances of asking them a question and listening, and asking them again and listening again, we'll identify what they're concerned about. And you can either say, you know, if you're a presenter earlier, was that Dave? I'm not sure if he's still here. He's obviously got all this information. And so once he's identified that shared value, he's made them feel validated in having that concern, he can share all his knowledge. Or if you're someone like me who doesn't have all this knowledge on climate change and methane in sheep industry, I can say, oh, look, yeah, a really big concern of mine as well. As a sixth generation sheep producer from Victoria, I can definitely say that that is a concern of ours. I do know that we have some targets, but I also know this bloke that has all this information about the research they're doing. Do you want me to connect you with him? And that way that we've identified that that's a value. And it might even be something less than that. It might even be nutrition and whether eating red meat such as lamb and sheep meat is good for us. And if we identify and talk to them, and maybe they're experimenting with different types of meat, whether it be organic or whether, you know, it might be plant-based, if we have a chat and identify what their concerns are, we might uncover something that allows us to have a really powerful share, because maybe they're a mother and you're a mother, and that is a value that you have in common because you want to give your kids a really nutritious feed. So what I'm trying to say here is that shared values is not going in gung-ho and giving them lots of facts. It's listening to them and sharing with them once we've really made them feel validated in what their concerns are and identified what concerns we actually share with them or values that we share with them. And we've identified that it's 3 to 5 times more likely to build trust using that method than just giving out all these facts and figures straight away and not letting them speak.
That's a big difference, 3 to 5 times better.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And I think in agriculture, you know, we're such practical people, and we base so much of what we do on science and facts. But when we're having these conversations, we really need to debunk that and use our authentic selves and our own stories to communicate. And that will be so much more effective in building trust or bridging the gap or building social license or whatever you want to call it.
I think what stands out for me, Millie, is so many people, when you get that feeling of the confrontation or the question that you don't want to answer, it's almost your nightmare question. You see a lot of people just wanting to back away and not continue to explore that and really try and understand the other person more. So that's a brilliant thing to be able to do. And the way you teach people to do it has been so useful. So thank you for that. The other thing I know that you spend a lot of time working on is more like a bridging technique. And it's when you hear something that you just don't agree with and people are putting you on the spot. And it's often an interview technique that we sometimes see used on TV. And I saw one on a podcast recently as well, which caught someone out. So with a bridging technique, when you get that question or that comment that you don't disagree with, I know you've done a bit of work in this. Would you be able to talk about acknowledging it, building a bridge, but then just taking control of the situation again in a really simple 3-step manner that I know is being so widely used by people?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that we need to do in this is be really clear about what our key message is. So use the example, Melissa, of a media interview. Never go into a media interview with a topic but not being clear on what the key things that you actually want to get across are, because you'll follow the conversation and you'll answer what they have to say because it's not clear in your own mind what you want to get across, and so you go on their agenda. But if you're really clear in what you want to deliver and what you want them to hear, if they ask a curly question about a tough topic, you'll be able to say, yes, but, and your but is your bridge, and then you will deliver your key message. So what I would encourage you to do is, if you're in a more media interview scenario, instead of following where they want to go, have your key message and don't think about what questions they're going to ask me. You say, right, no matter what question they're going to ask me, I'm going to bridge back to my key message and what actual information I want to get across. And you don't have to be rude about it. And I know sometimes you do feel like you need to answer the questions, and we're taught to do that. We're taught to do that through school. But if Melissa's asked me something, I'm like, yeah, I definitely acknowledge this is a concern, but this is what we're doing, and back to my key message.
It's as simple as A, B, C. That's how I try and remember it, that you drummed into us all in some of your trainings. Acknowledge, but, build the bridge with the but, and C, take control of the situation again. So Absolutely. That's a great one to have in your toolkit. A, B, C, acknowledge, bridge with a but, and control. And I've certainly been able to use that to diffuse some situations. The other time when you've explained is this can be really, really useful technique as well, is not necessarily if you disagree with someone, but if it's just a question that's outside your sphere of knowledge. For example, if it was a question that we know Dan would have the answer to on methane, but the question was delivered to me or you, we could use that same technique. Have you got an example like that where you can almost use the control part as diverting it back to the expert, or it's relevant on your farm?
Yeah, I think it's as easy as saying, look, that's not my area of expertise. What I do know is this, and it doesn't need to be long-winded. You can just say, I know an expert. I know someone who will be able to deliver something on this. Or if you don't know, for God's sake, don't make it up. Just say, I'm going to get back to you on this. Like, I've got some resources, or I've got someone in my network that does know more. Because you don't need to be across everything. Like, no one here is expected to be an expert on every single area of the sheep supply chain or agriculture more broadly. So if you're not the expert, you don't need to speak about that. But take that initiative to refer them to someone who perhaps is better suited to answer those types of questions. And that's why our collective network, and even just connecting on a global forum like this, is so powerful in what we can achieve collectively and as a united voice.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, thank you for adding those examples in. So everyone remember, as simple as A, B, C. And so anyone else have some final questions for Millie? So to me, the big things, the takeaway of your session there today have been, where there's a void of information, it's our opportunity to fill it. And that 65% of people want to know more. So that's a challenge that we set out to all of you to take the opportunity and work through that. So thank you so much, Millie, for being here and sharing part of what you do every day with the Global Sheep Forum.
No worries. Thanks, Melissa. If anyone has any further questions or wants to get in touch, you'll be able to find all my contact information on the website, or even if someone just wants to workshop a couple of scenarios or has a story they want to share with me, would love to connect with anyone, wherever you are.
Marvellous. Thank you so much. I would just like to say thank you for coming. I hope you've had a wonderful time at Global Sheep Forum Next Generation, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you for your continued contribution to the sheep industry, and have a lovely rest of the day.